And good morning, hockey fans, and what is going on? My name is Neil Villapiano, and welcome to the first ever episode of NHL Weekly Live, right here exclusively on the Hockey Podcast Network YouTube channel. And I am so excited to be bringing you guys this show throughout the entire hockey season. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with how this is going to go, here is how this show is going to go. So every week on Mondays at 10 a.m. Eastern right now, we are going to basically recap what happened the following week in the NHL world. And this one's obviously a special one because we are now into the first official week of the NHL season. We got 3 games on top for you guys to kick off the NHL season tomorrow on Tuesday. Predators at Lightning at 5:30, Blackhawks and Penguins at 8, which is obviously the debut of Connor Bedard against Sidney Crosby. And then you have the Seattle Kraken in Vegas taking on the now defending Stanley Cup champion Vegas Golden Knights here in that one. So we have a bunch of hockey to get to. Every team's going to get a chance to play a couple of games this week. It is so exciting to finally get back and watch some hockey. It has been exciting to obviously watch the preseason, and now it just ramps up because now the games matter, and that's going to be the really, really exciting thing. So for how this episode's going to go today, so really what we're going to do is we have some breaking news that involves the Buffalo Sabres that I think you guys definitely want to check out. And then the majority of today's episode is going to be basically a prediction episode, kind of showing you guys my predictions for divisions, as well as who's going to make it to the conference finals, who plays in the Stanley Cup finals, and ultimately who's going to win the 2024 Stanley Cup. We already got a couple people in the chat. Anaheim Ducks across the pond saying hockey season. Let's effing go. Absolutely. My good buddy Dylan in the chat saying what a beauty. Thank you so much for hanging out with us this morning. I know it's a little early for you over there in Vancouver. My good friend Kyle Manifold. You already know. If you guys have checked out the live watch-alongs before that I did last year, you know that Kyle has been on with me many times. He is an absolute beauty. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. And then we got Dan Carlo Villapa. Shout out, Siri. I am from the Philippines, still supporting the Vancouver Canucks. I am Dan the Man. That is absolutely awesome. Love that support. Sam Driscoll is in the chat. It's time to surge together. Obviously, they cover. Sam covers the Carolina Hurricanes here on THPN. And also, guys, to get you a little bit more information about myself personally, I have actually been working at THPN for now over 3 years. I started back in 2020, and I am currently the host of the Devil's State of Mind podcast here on the Hockey Podcast Network, which, if you could take a guess by the title, covers the New Jersey Devils. So if you guys want to check out more content from me, make sure you go check out the Devil's State of Mind podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. And also, we are now on YouTube as well. I just posted a brand new episode earlier this morning as we talked to James Nichols of New Jersey Hockey Now. Would really, really appreciate if you guys go check that out. And also make sure to like and subscribe to the Devil's State of Mind podcast. But also, while you're here, make sure to leave a like on the stream, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you're notified of every time we go live for NHL Weekly. Again, it'll be once a week at 10 a.m. Eastern, live right here on THPN. And also, if you guys missed the live show of this, you guys can always go back and watch the replays of it to catch up on anything that you missed in the NHL world. So, again, I am really, really excited to be doing this. These episodes are going to be more or less about a half hour long, kind of a good way to kind of get your week off on the right track. I know a bunch of people are probably off to work or at school or wherever the case may be, but nonetheless, I do appreciate you all hanging out with us for sure. My good friend RJ, who gives us score updates and really breaking news updates as well as in the chat. He's given us the first topic. We'll get to that in just a minute, RJ. As he also says, don't forget to hit the likes. Absolutely. But again, also just really want to quickly shout out our sponsors over at DraftKings Sportsbook. And guys, with so many sports going on right now, you have Major League Baseball playoffs. The NFL and college football are well underway. The NBA preseason has just kicked off. And obviously, we have the start of the NHL season this week. And with all of that and so much more going on, You already know that DraftKings Sportsbook is your number one destination to get in on all of the huge cash prizes. So when you go to DraftKings Sportsbook, make sure to use our promo code THPN, and don't forget to tell them that your boy Neil Villapiano sent you. And as always, fans, make sure you bet responsibly. So let's kind of just jump right into our first breaking news topic. This was obviously unplanned, but I woke up to this news, as I'm sure a lot of you did, and that is the Buffalo Sabres have signed Rasmus Dahlin to an 8-year extension, and the AAV is $11 million per year beginning with next season, the 2024-25 season. He is 23 years of age, as now both he, Tage Thompson, Dylan Cousins, and defenseman Matthias Samuelsson all have signed long-term deals to kind of create that official core of this new-look Buffalo Sabres. As it reads right here, he tied for 5th among NHL defensemen with 73 points, which is the 3rd highest mark by a defenseman in Sabres history. He also ranked 4th among all NHL players in ice time, even though he did miss 4 games. He is a former first overall pick back in 2018, and really when you look at Rasmus Dahlin, this is one of those guys that you got to give the Buffalo Sabres a lot of credit. They really developed him from the time they drafted him first overall to now. And you see that this Buffalo Sabres organization is really starting to progress more and more. I have argued several times throughout the offseason that I think that they have a really legitimate chance of finally breaking out of that playoff drought and getting back into the Stanley Cup playoffs. I think it's possible that they could be this year's New Jersey Devils in the fact that they really surprise the NHL. They come out and they're just a dominant team from start to finish and not only get into the playoffs, but get in with relative ease. My good buddy Angus is in the chat. Hi, Neil. I did not think I'd ever see you this early. Yeah, I know it's definitely a different perspective. I've done live things here on THPN early in the morning. I did a couple of Olympic games last year, which was like a lot of fun to do, like early in the morning. But yeah, this is a little bit different. And again, if you're just tuning in, NHL Weekly, giving you the best up-to-date news from around the NHL. And there's going to be a lot more to obviously talk about once we get through this week and the weeks moving forward. Again, every Monday live right here on the THPN YouTube channel at 10 a.m. Eastern. And again, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. So yeah, back to Rasmus Dahlin. So honestly and truly, this, to a lot of people, could look at it and you could make the argument to say, yeah, you could argue that maybe it's an overpayment, but I look at it this way. With Rasmus Dahlin, number one, I think he's one of the best up-and-coming defensemen. He's only 23 years of age. The kid just continues to get better. He is by far the top defenseman for that Buffalo Sabres team, a guy who's a constant NHL all-star, a guy who could easily become an NHL superstar, and a guy who could very well make a run at winning a Norris Trophy in the very near future, as early as this season, honestly. And I think for Buffalo to not only get their core guys locked in, but to get the message across that this Buffalo Sabres organization has been taking a turn for the better is just a great sign. And you could tell. And, Dahlin's saying it. I love the city. I love the team. I love everything. And I think that's really important because, as we all know, we have seen what has happened with the Buffalo Sabres over the last decade plus of all the crazy stories and all the disappointment that they've given their fans. And I think it's just great that they've finally been able to kind of get out of that and now move into this new era, this new exciting era of Buffalo Sabres hockey. And so I'm really happy that the Sabres were able to lock down Dahlin. I'm sure nobody is going to worry about that at all. Now in Buffalo, and he just locks up again, just locking up the core, which is really, really important. So I'm just going to say I'm ready for Jeff Skinner to play a playoff game. You have to lock up your core. Deal is worth it if you get to the playoffs finally. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, if the Sabres continue to miss the playoffs and not get in, then the deal doesn't look as good because then you're saying, well, you're paying him $11+ million and they're not having any sort of team success. I did also want to mention as well that Gary Bettman did mention last week that the NHL salary cap is indeed going to go up a couple of $1 million, which is great for a lot of teams. Basically for everybody, that the salary cap is going to go up. So contracts like this and others that we've seen throughout the offseason are actually going to end up looking better because teams are still going to have a really good amount of cap space to make other big time deals if they so choose to. RJ again, just, kind of giving us a quick how many games per day. So again, Tuesday we have 3 games I mentioned before. Wednesday we'll have 6. Thursday we'll have 7. Friday only 2, which is interesting. Saturday is a 14-game slate. That is pretty awesome. Nearly the entire NHL will be playing on Saturday, and then only 2 games on Sunday. So yes, today on Monday is the last day where we won't have regular season NHL hockey. Tomorrow, we are finally getting into it. Kyle Manifold, Martin Jones on waivers. I mean, okay. Is Martin Jones still a solid goalie? He's okay. Not the same that he once was when he was in San Jose several years ago. But, we'll see if any team has any interest in picking him up. Let's go on, Zach Martin, one of the hosts of the Surgecast, another Carolina Hurricanes podcast. Look at this freaking beauty talking hockey early on a Monday. Honestly, there's never a better time to be talking about hockey on a Monday, right? It's just a great time to be doing it. So, but again, going back to the big time news again, Rasmus Dahlin, an 8-year contract extension. That contract will actually begin next season. So this will be the final year of his current contract, and it's $11 million AAV. So definitely a really, really good amount. Dahlin, 233 career points, 46 goals, 187 assists in 355 career games. So he's only 45 games away from 400, which is remarkable for how young he is. One of 12 defensemen in NHL history to hit the 200-point mark before his 23rd birthday. So I think that overall, you could make the argument that you could say, oh, it's an overpayment this, oh, it's an overpayment that. But at the end of the day, what's so important for the Sabres is that they lock down Dahlin, and they're going to continue to try to lock down their core guys eventually when guys like Owen Power and Peyton Krebs need contracts and different guys like that. But you could see that they're really starting to lock down this core, and now it's about going out there and taking those next steps and getting back into playoff hockey. So again, Rasmus Dahlin, 8 years, $11 million AAV contract extension with the Buffalo Sabres earlier this morning. Sam Driscoll saying Tampa needs a goalie, something to pay attention to. Very good point. With Andrei Vasilevsky out the first 2 months of the season, there isn't a whole lot going on in terms of the goaltending with Tampa, and it does make you wonder if this is kind of really the start of Tampa's true decline from being the dominant cup contending team to where they are now. And speaking of the Tampa Bay Lightning, I think it is now an appropriate time to shift over into my predictions for the upcoming NHL season. So again, like I mentioned before, we are going to quickly, well, I wouldn't say quickly. We got about 15 minutes still here for today's first episode. We are going to go through each division. I'm going to give you a quick, idea as to why I chose this and this, that, and the other thing. While I'm also going to pick my wild card team, so then you'll know who made the playoffs and who did not. Then we'll jump right into the conference finals matchups and who ends up coming out on top, the Stanley Cup matchup, and then who ends up winning the Stanley Cup in 2023-24. And there are a lot of really solid options, and I think you guys might be a little surprised, maybe even consider it to be somewhat of a bold take as to what I have in the Cup final. Not even just the Cup final, but also the conference final as well. RJ, again, don't forget to hit the likes, subscribe, and also hit that notification bell. Again, really do appreciate y'all hanging out with us. And quickly here, before we get into our second topic of the day, we're going to take a quick commercial break and get a quick word from our sponsors. told you that was quick. It was only like 20 seconds. But okay, so we are into the second half of our first episode of NHL Weekly. Again, here live every Monday here at THPN at 10 p.m. Eastern, giving you guys the up-to-the-date news and everything going on in the NHL world. And we are going to jump into my predictions for the divisions, conference finals, Stanley Cup final, and of course, Stanley Cup champion. And we'll start in the Eastern Conference, then we'll start in the Atlantic Division. So the way that I have it here is basically we go Toronto's going to finish in first, win the division. Then you have Florida. Then you have Boston, Buffalo, Ottawa, Tampa Bay, Detroit, and then Montreal. So couple of things that you'll notice right away. First and foremost, I have the Boston Bruins still making the playoffs. And why is that? Well, you can understand why, the Bruins, even though they did lose Patrice Bergeron, who ultimately retired, this Bruins core is certainly getting up there in age, and they're coming off of the embarrassment of having an absolutely historic regular season, only to blow a 3-1 lead in the first round to the Florida Panthers and ultimately be eliminated in the first round in very, very embarrassing fashion. But to me, the Bruins still have themselves one of the best goaltending tandems in the NHL with Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman. Those two guys, I think, are going to steal a lot of games from Boston. I still think they're going to be a very competitive team. And no disrespect to the rest of the Atlantic Division, it's not one of the stronger divisions, and you still have several young teams that I think need another year before they really can make those legitimate runs into the playoffs and kind of dethrone the Bruins. The Bruins are not going to have a year close to what they had last year, but I still think they're going to end up being very, very solid. Florida, coming off of that miracle run to the Cup final last year, I think that they are legit. I think as long as their goaltending continues to be solid with Sergei Bobrovsky back there, I think they're going to be. I think they're going to be okay. I think that's really kind of I think they're going to be able to be one of the top teams in the Atlantic. The two biggest surprises that I'm sure a lot of you are going to look at is this: Buffalo finishing in fourth and Tampa Bay finishing in sixth. Well, here's why. Again, Tampa's going to be without Andrei Vasilevsky for the first 2 months of the season. And so when you look at that, I just have a hard time believing that even though Tampa still has a lot of good firepower and guys like Steven Stamkos and Point and, Kucherov and guys like that, I just think that the lack of good goaltending is going to hurt that team. And I think teams are going to take advantage of that early on. And so I think when you look at it, I think Tampa's going to really struggle at the gate, and they're going to be struggling to get back into things throughout the rest of the season. I have them not only finishing sixth, but obviously missing out on the playoffs. And I think it really is the beginning of the end for Tampa fans. Hate to say it, but you know what? I think that losing Vasilevsky is going to affect things. I think I would have been more generous to Tampa Bay if Vasilevsky was obviously healthy. In terms of Buffalo, like we just talked about when we broke the Rasmus Dahlin contract extension news, I just think Buffalo is prepared. I think they're ready to take that next step. I think they're ready to go. Ottawa's another team that you could obviously flip these two between Buffalo and Ottawa could be that team that makes that run, finally getting back in the playoffs. Detroit and Montreal, while they do have some young talent that is going to be exciting to watch, I just think that both of them are still not ready yet to really make those legitimate pushes. I think that goaltending, at least for Detroit, is going to be somewhat of a question. I think for Montreal, it's going to be a lack of a solid defense that's ultimately going to hurt them. So that's the way that I see it. In terms of Toronto, I mean, I don't want to say that Toronto wins this division by default, but, Toronto on paper and everything is the best team in this division. And I think overall in the regular season, I think they're going to get it done. Come back to me when the playoffs start and how I feel about the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm sure a lot of you do. Kyle, appreciate the compliment on the graphics, man. Came up with this literally last night. Starcastic remarks, those boys cover the Dallas Stars over on THPN. What's up, Neil? What's going on, guys? Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Don't worry, we'll talk about the Dallas Stars in just a little bit. Sam saying Boston beating out Tampa Bay is a bold take. I just think that goaltending is going to be a difference maker, and the Bruins are fully healthy and have a really solid tandem. Tampa Bay doesn't really have goaltending other than Vasilevsky. And like you mentioned before, Sam, and Kyle brought it up, Martin Jones is on waivers, something to keep your eye on if you're Tampa Bay. Maybe they decide to bring him in to at least have some decent veteran goaltending back there to kind of help try to right the ship until Vasilevsky gets back. So that is my prediction for the Atlantic Division. And now we go to what I call the Division of Death, and that is the Metropolitan Division. And I think the only question in this division is how the top three is going to go. And I think you can kind of put it in several different ways. Although I would argue to say that the only thing that probably doesn't change from the top three really is first place. I truly believe that the Carolina Hurricanes are the cream of the crop when it comes to the Metropolitan Division. They are the deepest team. They have loads of offensive talent. Andrei Svechnikov is going to be coming back, and I think that that's going to be a really, really good point, really, really good thing for that team. You have the New Jersey Devils, who came off an unbelievably historic season, shocking the NHL world, beating the Rangers in the first round of the playoffs before ultimately being knocked out in 5 by Carolina. But they are battle-tested. They have a team that is deep. Obviously, there is going to be some questions in net with Vitek Vanacek and also Akira Schmid. And they looked pretty good in the preseason. But again, that was preseason, so we'll see. The New York Rangers, obviously, you got Peter Laviolette now. A lot of question marks in terms of the age of this team, and they obviously need their young guys like Filipino and Capo Caco and Alexis Lafreniere to start really getting going. So kind of keep your eye on that. And, Igor Shesterkin is still one of the top 2 goaltenders in the NHL. And then speaking of top 2 goaltenders, the New York Islanders, who I have finishing in 4th in front of the Pittsburgh Penguins, because I think Ilya Sorokin is going to steal a lot of games for that team, and I think that's going to end up being a factor down the stretch. Pittsburgh, obviously, the goal for them is to get back into the playoffs and make one last run with this core of Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and Chris Letang. They got Erik Karlsson, and not only did they acquire Erik Karlsson, they ended up giving up cap, which is great. They ended up gaining cap space because of that deal. So a great job there by the Pittsburgh Penguins for them to do it. But I just, the goaltending is still a question mark to me. Not a big fan of Christian Jarry. I just think it's going to be that team's Achilles heel. Washington, I mean, they're getting up there in age. I just don't see them being that competitive like they've been in years past. I think they'll have a similar year like they did last year. Ovechkin's going to obviously continue to try to beat Wayne Gretzky's record, but I think that's about the only thing you could really hang your hat on if you're Washington. Columbus and Philadelphia. I feel for the Columbus Blue Jacket fans. They've been through quite the offseason, and I think it's going to be a difficult year. It's a rebuilding year for this team. They do have some, obviously, veteran pieces that are going to help them, but I think they're going to end up struggling. Mike Babcock, obviously, with all the craziness that happened a couple of weeks ago and him ultimately having to resign, I think it will play a factor in the Blue Jackets season. And, it's going to be a tough year, but hopefully there's some good parts of it. Philadelphia, yeah, not much to say. They finally decided that they're going to rebuild. Danny Briere and Keith Jones now at the helm. We'll see if they can finally turn that Flyers team around. Not anytime soon, but hopefully in the future for them. I think that's really important here. Sam Driscoll saying, Neil, you love the Canes. I didn't say I love the Canes. I'm just being realistic and fair. 2024 NHL playoffs tentative schedule of round one. Round one game is on April 15th, 2024. Expected to the end of the Stanley Cup Finals to be on June 16th, 2024. So there you go. Thank you for that, RJ. AB Caniac Session, another Hurricanes podcast here on THPN. We got a lot of Hurricanes people hanging out with us today. Neil with the love. Just trying to be honest. All right, Neil, does Timo Meier score 35 goals over or under? I'm going to go with over. I think he ends up with 38 on the year. I don't think he'll have as much as he did last year, but I think because the Devils team is so stacked with talent, there's a lot of depth there at the top 6. I mean, you have Jack Hughes, Nico Kisher, Jesper Bratt, Dawson Mercer, Timo, Tyler Toffoli, who they acquired in the offseason. I mean, there is so much offensive talent right there. Even in the bottom 6, they're going to be able to have some decent scoring, that I think there's going to be times where it's going to be a little hard with there being not enough puck to go around, but still I think Timo Meier's going to get his come now that he is signed long-term in New Jersey. But again, I have Carolina, New Jersey, New York, the Islanders, Pittsburgh, Washington, Columbus, and then Philadelphia in terms of that. Now, in terms of the wild cards, I have one team from each division being the wild cards. Give me the Buffalo Sabres to come out of the Atlantic Division and get that first wild card. I think it's their time. I think they are ready to finally get back into the playoffs, and I'm excited to see playoff hockey in upstate New York. And then from the Metro Division, I have the New York Islanders squeaking into the playoffs. I think that even though they do lack some scoring, I think overall, I think that the goaltending is going to play a huge positive factor, and I think they're going to find a way, even in this tough division, to squeak into the playoffs. I think they have enough talent there. Adding Bo Horvat last season now into a full year, I think it's going to be I think they're going to be able to find a way. So give me the Sabres and the Islanders as the two wildcard teams coming out of the Eastern Conference. Devils will try to outscore their problems. Same thing Avs did. I mean, look, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, then, the Devils general manager, Tom Fitzgerald, I'm sure will try to make adjustments as best as he can. I'm 100% fine playing the Islanders or Buffalo. Well, the Hurricanes played the Islanders last year in the playoffs, so I'm sure they would have no issue playing either one. Although I would say Carolina versus Buffalo, I think would be a fun first-round series, Sam. I think that would go more than 5 games, in my opinion. I think that the Sabres would certainly surprise some people. So now let's shift over to the Western Conference, and we'll start with the Central Division. By the way, I don't know where I found this Colorado logo, but I think it's cool, and I would love to see them try to use it a little bit more. But quickly here, I have Dallas winning the division, followed by Colorado, then Minnesota, Nashville, St. Louis, Winnipeg, Arizona, and then the Chicago Blackhawks. Really quickly, there's a lot that you could say about the Dallas Stars that's just fun and exciting. Jake Ottinger is arguably my favorite goaltender in the NHL. He is absolutely tremendous, super clutch goaltender. Really loved watching Jason Robertson play hockey. This kid, I think, is going to end up being a Hart Trophy candidate. I think he has the capability to do so. Miro Heiskanen in the same draft class in 2017 as guys like Nico Hischier and Nolan Patrick, although Nolan Patrick obviously didn't work out. Nonetheless, Miro Heiskanen, a guy that is super, super athletic on both ends of the ice, a guy who could be a quarterback if you're power play. I just don't think he gets talked about enough because he plays on such a deep Dallas Stars team. I think overall, the Stars are the team to beat in the Central Division. The one thing I will say, I know Starcastic Remarks is happy I'm pumping their tires right now. The one thing I will just warn you is that coming from somebody who has watched the Devils for many years, Pete DeBoer, usually after his first season, things tend to start not going well, and the system starts to become an issue. So just keep that in mind, not only in the regular season, but in the playoffs as well once you get there. So I think that's really kind of what you have to keep around. Calling it now, only 3 teams from the Central make the playoffs. We'll see if I agree with that statement. Colorado, obviously, they're looking to avenge last year's first-round loss to the Seattle Kraken. They still have a very talented team. Gabriel Landeskog, unfortunately, I don't think he'll ever play hockey again. I just can't see it, honestly. It's the goaltending, I think, is still solid. Alexander Georgiev. Minnesota, definitely a team that I think needs to take a deeper run into the playoffs. They keep getting in, but once they get in, they seem to just not get anything done. Nashville, I mean, they got to be, now that you got Andrew Burnett back there, you got a new regime with Barry Trotz now working hockey ops. We'll see. I know that there was a lot of talk about maybe UC Saros being moved at the deadline if things don't go well for Nashville. Something to keep your eye on as the season progresses. St. Louis, I think, is going to make a decent run to maybe getting into the playoffs. Jordan Bennington, yeah, that man needs to just calm the hell down. He just really needs to calm the hell down. Winnipeg, obviously big story for them. Does Connor Hellebuck and or Mark Scheifele get moved before this season ends? Lot of rumors coming out throughout the offseason. Nothing ended up happening except Pierre-Luc Dubois finally getting traded, except he ended up in LA and not Montreal, and he signed a long-term deal. Arizona, I mean, with Logan Cooley now playing, I'm really excited to see what he can do. I think he's going to help that Coyotes team. The only question I have for them is this. Are they ever going to get a new stadium? I just don't know. I would like to see if they do. The Blackhawks, obviously going to be exciting for just the fact that Connor Bedard is a Chicago Blackhawk. Obviously, I'm curious to see how he plays with guys like Taylor Hall on his line. Other than that, I mean, it's a team certainly in rebuild, a team that's going to definitely have a lot of struggles this year, but nonetheless, I think that they will be definitely on people's minds a lot when they get to watch Connor Bedard play this upcoming season. Sam says, Bennington versus Kochetkov. I'm here for that fight. Wouldn't be surprised if it happened. We did have a trade yesterday. Sam Lafferty traded from Vancouver to Toronto for a 5th-round pick, 2024. So we had a little minor trade yesterday. And Yotes are basically homeless at this point. They are. I mean, they play at the Mullet Arena, but that's the home of the Arizona State. But nonetheless, they certainly need to find a way to get a new home and get it fast, or the NHL may seriously consider potentially moving them. So now we come to the Pacific Division, and I'll just say this right away. This is probably the easiest of the 4 divisions, only because there's a pretty big difference between the good teams in this division and then the not-so-good teams. So first and foremost, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and the Oilers, I think, are going to take the division. The defending Stanley Cup champion, Vegas Golden Knights, I think are going to go second. The Seattle Kraken, I believe, are going to get back in the playoffs. I think they are ready to make a pretty deep run. I know goaltending is still a question mark, but do not be surprised if certain teams have to deal their goaltenders at the deadline that Seattle doesn't make a push. I think Seattle's ready to take that major step to making a long run in the playoffs. Los Angeles Kings, they got Pierre-Luc Dubois. There's still some question marks in net. Definitely another team to keep your eye on throughout the season when it comes to goaltending. This is a team that does have some really solid young talent. They do have some veteran guys as well, and Drew Doughty and Andrzej Kopitar, who could still, be productive to an extent. LA, they've made the playoffs the last couple of years, and they're hoping to not only make the playoffs this year, but obviously make a longer run. Calgary, obviously, with losing the guys that they did, not only this past offseason, but the year before, and obviously bringing in a whole new regime. They're a team that is not really rebuilding necessarily, but they are kind of retooling. The one thing that I think I didn't like is Dustin Wolf getting sent down to the AHL. I mean, this kid has been phenomenal the last 2 years in the AHL. I don't know what you have to lose by not having him back up Jakob Markstrom to start the year. And I think Dustin Wolf's going to end up being one of the really young, talented goaltenders in our game in the near future. But I see Calgary making a push. I think that they do have talent that they could certainly make somewhat of a push. I don't know about playoffs, though. Anaheim, they locked down. They were able to lock down Drysdale. They got Trevor Zegras finally on a deal. They do have teams. They do have players that can certainly be on the highlight reel, and they have some young guys moving and grooving. But I don't think Anaheim has enough right now to be ultra competitive. And then you have Vancouver and San Jose. I think Vancouver's going to obviously be better than they were last year. They got through all of the drama last year. I think now they have a lot of, NHL Hall of Fame kind of players who are now on their coaching staff. And I think it's going to benefit a lot of the young players on that Vancouver team. San Jose, going to put it, blunt, they're going to suck, and they're going to suck hard. They have very little to no talent. Their goaltending is a mess. This Sharks team is only now deciding that it's time to fully rebuild. There's still some other veteran guys like Tomas Hertl, Logan Couture, and Marc-Edouard Vlasic, who has arguably the worst contract in the NHL. I just don't see them having a whole lot of success. And you have Kaapo Kakkonen and Mackenzie Blackwood as your goaltending. Yeah, it's going to be a long season for the San Jose Sharks that I know the only positive you could say is hopefully it leads to maybe getting a top pick again this year. I think that's definitely a hope for them. Kyle says Wolf deserves better. He does. I really don't get the decision-making behind that. I know maybe they're saying, oh, we don't want to put that much pressure on him. You got nothing to lose. You have nothing to lose. And I think he could bring a lot of excitement to this Flames team. I think, talking about the Anaheim Ducks, I think we just miss out this year. It's always possible. Every year there's at least 2 or 3 teams that surprise everybody, whether good or bad, that maybe they end up being a lot better than we all think. John Gibson's still back there. I think, if he can get back to a form that he was at not too long ago, and the offense is a little bit more consistent, I think Anaheim can certainly make a run and maybe pushing for a playoff spot. Now, in terms of the wild cards in the Western Conference, here is what I have. We have, again, same thing as I did in the Eastern Conference. I have one team from the Central. Actually, excuse me. I don't. I have 2 teams from the Pacific Division. So I don't have anybody from the Central coming out of the wild card. Give me the Los Angeles Kings and the Calgary Flames to make the playoffs. I think the Flames are going to find a way. I think they have enough talent with guys like Jonathan Huberdeau and Nazem Kadri and Elias Lindholm and guys. And the goaltending, even if it's just Markstrom, I still think is solid enough where this team could make a very, very late push to getting into the playoffs. The Pacific Division isn't incredibly hard, so I think the Flames are going to be in a lot of games this year, and I don't think they're as bad as people give them credit for. So I have both. I have 2 teams from the Pacific, so I have 6 teams coming out of the, 5 teams from the Pacific Division coming out of that division and into the playoffs. So that's your first kind of surprise here. So now we're going to shift to the conference final prediction, and we'll start in the Eastern Conference. I have the New Jersey Devils taking on the Florida Panthers. I wanted to put Devils versus Carolina, although it's very unlikely if they finish 1-2. It's very unlikely that they would play each other in the third round. They'd end up playing as late as the second round like they did last year. But give me the New Jersey Devils against the Florida Panthers. I think both of these teams, I think the Devils are ready to take that next step to making a long run. I know goaltending is going to be a question. Their defense is still a little bit of a question in terms of the lack of veteran presence back there, but I think this Devils team is battle-tested and ready to go. Florida, I think, is going to make another deep run. I think they are built like a long-term playoff team, and I think you're going to see both of them in the conference finals. And give me the New Jersey Devils to knock off Florida in 6 games to advance to their first Stanley Cup final since 2012. And then we go over to the Western Conference Finals. We have the Seattle Kraken and the Dallas Stars, a rematch of last year's second round, which went 7 games. That was one of the better second round series that we saw, one of the better series that we saw in the entire playoffs. You know what, Kyle? Call me what you want. I'm going with what I feel. I'm going with what I feel, and that's how it is. But I think that's going to be another fun series between these 2 teams. And I have the Kraken. I'm sorry to the Starcastic Remarks people, but I have the Seattle Kraken knocking off the Dallas Stars in 6 games to advance to their first ever Stanley Cup final. And part of it is the fact that it seems like now every time we have an expansion team, they quickly end up becoming a cup contending team. And I think also Seattle made a lot of positive moves forward. And like I said before, don't be surprised if they're in on one of the big name goaltenders that becomes available at the trade deadline and they make a move. One prediction that I made is that I could see Seattle being the team that ends up getting a guy like Connor Hellebuck at the deadline. I think that could be kind of a last missing piece for that Kraken team. Devils have a good team, so it's fair enough, but I think Florida wins that. It's fair. The Devils have had their struggles against Florida in the regular season. That's a team that plays a style that is in contrast to New Jersey. And obviously with the lack of physicality from New Jersey, it could play a major factor in the Devils having success against Florida in the playoffs. But I just think that overall, the Devils team is deep enough where they can truly make that run. And they have that experience now of playing in the playoffs. They know what they have to do in each round and kind of refocus in after one round. And I think they're capable of doing it. I really do. I really, really do. So again, going back to the Western Conference Finals, give me the Kraken to knock off the Stars in 6 games. And so that brings us to the 2024 Stanley Cup Finals, aka the Cryptid Cup between the New Jersey Devils and the Seattle Kraken. And who do I have winning the 2024 Stanley Cup Finals? Well, it's none other than the New Jersey Devils. I have them winning in 7 games against the Seattle Kraken. I think this is going to be a really fun series between two very young, super talented teams with guys going up against, Matty Beniers against Jack Hughes and all this different talent that both teams have, that I think it's going to end up being one of those Stanley Cup Finals that you think that there's a very favorable team, but it ends up going back and forth. Kind of similar, and Anaheim Ducks across the pond can relate to this, kind of similar to the 03 Cup Final between the Devils and Anaheim, where a lot of people expect the Devils to have an easy time against the Mighty Ducks, but it ended up going the full 7 games before the Devils were able to win it. Ironically, this picture, I believe, is actually this is from 95, actually. That's the way that I kind of look at it. The Devils feel like the Anaheim team who got beat off the tougher Devils team at the time. Sometimes a bit of grit trumps stylish hockey. That's a good point. It definitely can play a factor, and it wouldn't shock me if that ends up being the Devils' demise either. And I understand that people want to accuse me of being a little homerish. I understand, but at the same time, this is how I honestly feel. I do believe that the Devils are capable enough of making a run to the Stanley Cup Final and ultimately winning it. So, again, to kind of go back really quickly here, I have the Devils taking on the Seattle Kraken in the Stanley Cup Final, and the New Jersey Devils winning in 7 games to claim the franchise's 4th Stanley Cup in franchise history and their first in just over 2 decades. So that is my predictions for the divisions, conference finals, and Stanley Cup Finals, and Stanley Cup champion for the 2023-24 season. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I am so excited to continue to be doing this show again. New episodes live here on THPN every Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern. NHL Weekly. And again, if you missed the live broadcast, you can always go back and watch the replay of them as well. We'll also be sharing the episodes on social over on Twitter at HockeyPodNet and also over on other social media platforms. Again, make sure to leave a like on the stream, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any new NHL Weekly episodes that we post. We're also going to be doing a lot of live watch-alongs of NHL games. Of course, myself and many others will be calling games throughout the year. And again, guys, we are 1 day away from the start of the NHL season. I am so excited to be doing it. Make sure to follow me on social at Twitter at the MVP Show, also on Instagram at NVPQB11. And of course, you can see at the top here, follow us on social at HockeyPodNet and also on Twitter as well at HockeyPodNet. And while you're at it, go check out the Devil State of Mind podcast, to which I am the host of. We are available not just in audio wherever you listen to podcasts, but also on YouTube as well. Check it out, Devil State of Mind podcast, which covers the New Jersey Devils. But again, guys, thank you all so much. Appreciate the compliment, Anaheim Ducks across the pond. But thank you all so much for hanging out with us today on the first episode of NHL Weekly. And we will see you next week. And again, hockey is officially back, baby.